Hello, everybody. Schmidt from Rocket Lasso, and welcome to my NAB presentation. I'm very excited for this one because I haven't done this type of thing in a while, and that's going to be, well, actually, first of all, Rocket Lasso, what do? We do tutorials. We do live streams where pretty much right after NAB is done, I'm going to start live streaming on Wednesdays again. So if you ever have Cinema 4D questions, you can jump on into my live stream on either Twitch or on YouTube, and I'm just going to tackle questions straight live to the audience. So we just mostly answer cool technical questions, reverse engineer cool things that we've seen. You'll actually see a little bit of that today. And of course, we make tools over here at Rocket Lasso. And speaking of tools, I've actually got a little bit of a demo reel for you today, which I pretty much never do. And that is because Rocket Lasso just released a brand new tool just a couple of days ago, and it's actually on sale right now. So I'm actually going to pop open this video and hopefully just let this thing speak for itself. So yeah, that is our newest tool we put together. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about it throughout the presentation and spraying it in, but I don't want to do a big focus on like our product stuff. But the important thing to note is that this is a tool that piggybacks off of the volume builder. So we usually take a volume builder and put into a volume mesher. Instead, you can put into our voxel mesher and you get tunes out of it. But it goes so much further where it actually will combine with corners in amazing ways, taking on the colors of your incoming object, any of the materials. And like, it's just a very powerful tool. I'm excited to see people actually get to play with it. I teased it years ago. But anyway, we're just going to jump back here into Cinema 4D and just mention that we actually have a 15% off right now of this new tool. So if you use code block by block, you can go and pick up Voxel Mesher for 15% off. You can just find it by going to rocketlasso.com and it'll lead you right over to the plugin. But what I'm really excited today to be talking about is the return of my 50 minutes of tips and tricks. What we're going to be doing is jumping all around Cinema 4D to, no coherence whatsoever, topic to topic, and just talking about cool little processes and tips and tricks and things I think people might not know about. Little things that pass by me, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that. That's going to help me. So some of these are bigger projects we'll talk about in 5 minutes. Some are going to be like 5 seconds long of like, did you know that this button was here? So we're going to jump around all over the place. And hopefully there's a little something for everybody. If you're brand new to cinema, then hopefully there'll be some cool stuff overall. But if you've been using it for a long time, hopefully a couple little tricks in here that'll help speed up your workflow. So having said that, let's go and jump into the very first one. And that is, are you aware of the new Object Profiler? This has only been in cinema for a couple versions now. So I'm going to close that file. And here you can see a animation that I put together during one of my live streams. Somebody asked a question about making some growth, some growth effects going. It's, pretty cool setup. You can see it's running like incredibly smoothly. But I'm getting about 12 frames a second right now. Well, there's a new tool inside of Cinema. If you go to Window and you go down to Object Profiler, you pop that open, you're going to get this new, essentially it looks just like the Object Manager. And what this is going to be doing is giving you real-time feedback of what objects in your scene are taking the longest to calculate. Now, by default, there's a couple different modes here. By default, I think it's usually on like the current frame. And usually it's based on time. So you see that this is saying, oh, this top object is taking like 15 milliseconds. And it's like 1,000 of a second. But my personal favorite mode is switching this over to all frames. And that means it's kind of getting a running average of everything. And then changing this, I don't care about the specific milliseconds. I want to know what percentage of the time it's taking up. And you see in this particular scene file, 25% of my time is being taken up just by this single target effector. And, depending on what you're doing, it's like, oh, okay, if I'm working on other aspects of the scene, maybe I just want to turn that off. So I'll just hold down Control, turn off that entire bit of hierarchy, and that should be speeding me up by 25%. If I just delete it out, and let's let that run again, then that's now not calculating, and the entire scene should be 25% faster for me. Now, that's just a random example there, but one I found that was a lot more practical, as I was actually just going through some of my old C files.
You got to spin.
Is in this one. Now, this is another question I got during a Rocket Lasso live, where we're trying to get this really cool text extruding up out of the ground via all these nice little slices. And I think this whole thing is built in Vanilla Cinema. And I want to give a shout out to the original artist that this was the question was based on. So from Mario Denmeyer, that's where I got the question from. And we saw this. I was like, oh, let's see if we can make this effect that actually came out of Cavalry and remake it in Cinema 4D. But anyway, in this particular scene, if I were to, I'm going to hit play. Let's open up that object profiler again. And I'm getting, okay playback here. But you can see that actually 65% of my calculation time is being taken up by the thicken generator, which is actually something that's pretty new inside of Cinema. So it's like, okay, well, I'm just using that to thicken up my lines. And if that's going so slow in this particular setup, I love the thicken generator. But I'm going to yank this out. And it's like, well, maybe we could do this in a different way. So I'll delete out the thicken and let me search. I'm going to hit Shift-C and search for the word extrude. And let me grab one of the capsule-based extrudes here. And I'll drag that into my scene. And let's let that, I'll drop this inside my loft and let that extrude. And it's like, ooh, that's way worse. Look, that's eating me 80% of the time. So that was way worse. I don't want to actually be doing that workflow. So I'm going to delete that one out. That one's really slow it out. So I delete that out. I say, oh, instead, let's go. I tried actually a bunch of different methods. And it's like, I've got this geometry. I want to extrude it. So I'm actually going to use the old school cloth surface. And I'll just drop my loft inside of that cloth. Tell that to not subdivide. But yes, I'd like to add some thickness in. And that should bring that entire thing back again. But now, as I let it play, you see that the cloth is actually way down in my hierarchy. That's only even 5% of the calculation time. So I'm actually, just massively increased this by like 60% speed just by switching out one object to another. I would have had no idea what object was slowing me down until I have this object profile. So yeah, pop this open. It's actually really handy. It's just another object manager effectively. So I can select things in this menu. You see it's actually selecting on the opposite side as well. So it's like, wait, which plane effector is this taking calculation time? And you click it, it highlighted over here. You actually drag objects in between and whatnot. But yeah, object profile, check it out. If your scene's going slow, it's an amazing way of diagnosing what the problem might be. Okay, up next, we've got Redshift color, or Redshift display color. And this is a technique that I like to use where I want to colorize my objects. What's the right way of saying it? So we've got all these different materials, like, you're working from a bunch of different things. You got all these different colors. Let's say you got like a bunch of plastic objects. You got like 50 different plastic objects. And they're all pretty much identical, but they're supposed to be different colors. And you have to go and you have to make 50 different copies of your material. And if you need to make a change, you have to manually change every single one of them. Well, let's go and pop open an object for my asset browser. So I'm going to search for the word statue. And I'm just going to open up this awards statue here. And for sanity's sake, because I can use this next one as well, I'm just going to scale this up to be a bit bigger. Okay, cool. So I got this award statue. You can see it's made of 3 parts. I'll delete out those materials and we'll make these from scratch. So deleting those out, let's zoom on in on my object. And let's say that I make this nice, simple Redshift material. And it's got pretty much the properties I want to. I could say I want it to be metallic, but I'm just going to leave it essentially this basic plastic-looking material. And I can apply it to all 3 objects. And like I said, normally you'd have to go and colorize every single one of these individually. But if we move inside of our material, I can double click and search for the word user. And inside you're going to see that we have a color user data. If I double click on that, I'm sure a lot of you use this all the time. It's a very standard workflow where you grab your color user data, you pipe this through to your color channel, and then you can click presets and say, hey, I want to grab the MoGraph color. I want to grab, well, usually everybody's probably grabbing the MoGraph color. And we can actually use that in this instance. I actually didn't realize this until I was building a presentation. But if I click on color, then now, actually you see when this is empty, this was black because it's not getting any color. But if I say, hey, give me the MoGraph color, then yeah, it is actually taking on the color of the object. But here's what's cool. If I were to select all 3 of my objects, I'm going to change my display color not to be the material, but to be automatic. And now I can grab every object individually and grab this color here. And if I say, hey, I want this part of statue to be pink, that's now pink. I can grab a different object and say, okay, but this part of the object is supposed to be yellow. And then maybe this last one is going to be blue. So I'm able to modify these objects by their display color right here. And that's piping through the color user data. And now I can have a plastic material on all three objects with only one material. And so I make tons of scene files where it's like, oh, I'm just making one universal metal color and I'll just colorize my different objects, different metals. And now I don't have 50 different materials. I'll have like one plastic, one blurry messed up plastic, one metal, one messed up metal, and then everything else can just be this incredibly simple single node inside of my node editor. Now let's go and talk about the next one, which is kind of piggybacking off of this a little bit. So I'm going to close that down and let's talk about Redshift scalar data. So like I said, everybody's probably used that color data workflow. If you use Redshift at all, then you're trying to take in your cloner information and colorize things. But there are different types of colors that we can feed through, or different types of data rather. So I'm going to search for that statue again. Let's pop it back open. And like I said, I want to scale that up a bit. And this time I will select the statue itself and select these polygons, UA or UW to select all, UI, and just delete out that. And what I want to do is try something that's not mainly straight up color. Maybe I want certain parts of the statue to look metallic and certain parts not to look metallic. And we can't do that with the color channel because then we'd be stealing away all the information for the colors that we probably want to keep for the colors. So here's what I'm thinking. I would like to grab this statue and I'll put this into a volume builder. You see it's going to turn into a bunch of different boxes. And I'll drop this size down to maybe 3. And then I'll make a separate object. I'll make a sphere. And T for scale that down a bit. Let's speed this up. Make it look like the statue's holding that ball. And I'll also drop that into the volume builder so you see it just becomes a regular shape. Now, most of you are probably familiar with the workflow. You can grab the volume builder and I will feed that into a volume mesher. Hold down Alt or Option. And now you see we get this nice kind of blobbed out mesh. If I want to, we can go and grab the threshold here and I could like inflate it a little bit. But I'm going to actually use my new tool just to demonstrate this. And that's the voxel mesher. So here's that same volume builder, but if I go to my plugin and grab the Rocket voxel mesher, I can drop that inside, and instead we're getting these instant cubes making up the entire thing. So now we get these lovely cubes. I could grab my voxel mesher, I can change the threshold on that, make that a little bit thicker, and you can see here that I've got this lovely like empty shell of an object, or I can convert this to cubes. If I shrink these down, you can see that the entire thing is made of cubes now. We can return that as all these flat planes. And then later on, you'll see, but we can also return this as a point cloud and do cool stuff with cloners with it. So actually, just as a cool thing, if I were to hold down Alt and click my Convert to Cloner button in my new tool, you'll see it's actually going to turn this into a cloner object and actually build it with a bunch of spheres. So like a very fast, fun workflow. But anyway, I am going to leave this on the cube and just use this as an instance of showing off this scalar effect. Now, what I would like to do is, actually I will convert this to a cloner. So let's say convert to cloner. Now I've got a bunch of cubes. And then I'm going to, just think of this as a cloner. We've made whatever cloner object, basic setup. And now I can throw in a plane effector. Now the plane effector right now is pushing everything up on Y. I don't want that. So instead we are going to, actually, let me leave the position on. And we can do something like grab the spherical field, or the sphere, and drag it into my field tab. So here's the sphere, and now you see that the sphere itself is now moving up and getting colorized just because it's seeing that object. Now I'm just using this as a way of visualizing this tool, but if we move into the plane and say, grab the sphere, I'm going to change this to be calculating based on the surface, and I can play with this radius. And essentially I want this entire thing to be fed through like really sharply. I could even grab my remapping and grab my inner offset and really kind of clamp that in. And I'm fine with a little bit of transition there. But now what I'm going to say is like, okay, we can now see what is being affected by this effect. I'm going to say, well, I don't want that to be affected by position. Instead, I want to do something like grab my weight transform and drag that up. So now we've modified that variable. The weight is up at 100% anywhere that that sphere is being applied. And I will actually turn off, I guess we'll keep the color. So we can say color remap, and I'll make this kind of a gold color. Maybe make that a little bit orangey. Cool. So now that I've got that, we can move into a material. So I will double click and make a brand new material, and I'll throw this onto the cloner. And we can do that same thing where I can grab my color user data, and pipe that through into the color and grab the MoGraph color. And now you can see that hopefully my clones will be, oh wait, I have to change this to be render instance. There. Now you can see it actually there in the viewport. So yes, now I've been able to translate the colors, but I don't want to eat up that color track, like I said, but I want the sphere to be metallic looking. So how do we do that? Well, there's actually a bunch of different types of user data. If I were to double click and search for the word user, you can see that we also have integer user data, scalar user data, string, vector. So what I'm going to use is the scalar data, which generically you kind of think of that as a 0 to 100%. But you'll see as I grab that, if we click the drop downs, they're different. If we go to MoGraph, you see I'm not getting the MoGraph color, but I can get things like the object ID or the index ratio, the clone offset, the fallout weight. But what I'm going to use is the weights that we just piped through, like the MoGraph weight channel. So if I click on that, I've got this new type of data I'm outputting. So if I were to grab that and grab maybe my metallic, my metalness, I'm going to hold down control as I click on this dot. Actually, no, metalness is always exposed. So yeah, right there. I'm going to pipe that information out right here. So now I'm saying certain parts of this should look metallic and certain parts shouldn't. And I'm doing that via the plane effector thanks to this weight transform. So with any luck, if we pop open my Redshift render view and hit go, give that a second to initialize. And there we go. You can now see that the top part of the statue here is looking nice and metallic. And the rest of it is looking essentially not metallic, still shiny, but let's grab this, add a little bit of roughness on there. And yeah, you see that's nice and shiny and the bottom part isn't. If I grab my plane effector and stop saying, oh, and we have to refresh that. If you change a variable, you have to drop this down. So I can say, hey, get rid of that. And now you see it's not metallic anymore. So you can actually pipe through all of these different types of data. If I click on the scalar data, you saw all these different types of information that we could be pulling from particles, from objects themselves, and all of these different clone or like MoGraph based bits of information. And there are, of course, the other user data as well. So I just recommend going and playing around with those because you might be able to do even more parametric coloring. You have to make less things editable and just get more out of your MoGraph setups. All right, moving on. Next up, we've got, clone density. This one's really good. So this is a technique I recently came up with while I was having a conversation with somebody at Maxon. And I was like, I want to put that into my presentation. Can I do it? They're like, yes, do it. Okay, so there's a bunch of different ways that we can tackle this. But the basic idea is if you, how do I want to set this up? I'll make a plane and I want to scatter a bunch of objects onto this plane, okay? Now, if I were to do the standard setup, let's make a matrix object and I'll change it to be a nice bright color. I'll just make it pink so we can see it very clearly. And I'll say, okay, matrix, I want you to clone not as a grid, but onto a object, and the object will be the plane. And I say I get a bunch of clones. Now, of course, as I start increasing my amount here, it's cool, we get like lots of them. I'll make more and more and more. So we get like a ton of clones, but of course they're randomly distributed. They're overlapping on top of each other. So we could get rid of these in various ways. And here's one actually in place we could do for a long time, relatively straightforward. But if I were to make a MoGraph effector of the push apart type, you see it's going to be pushing those all apart from each other. And push apart is great. I do like push apart for certain applications. But there's actually different modes inside here. So first of all, I'll grab my radius and drop this way down. So you see they're all there. And as I increase this, they're going to slowly push apart from each other. But instead, I'm going to drop my radius way down and say, don't push apart. Instead, hide them. So you can say hide the clones. And now you can see that suddenly the ones that were really crammed on top of each other are disappearing. And if I start increasing my radius, we've got this perfect random distribution, but now I know for a fact, let's go up to 10, I know for a fact that none of these are within a radius of 10 of each other. So we get like absolute control. So even though I just generated like a ton of clones all over the place, like over 2,000 of them, now I'm left with this nice clean distribution, and I know for a fact nothing is closer than 10. Now, the reason I did this as a matrix is we can now go into our asset browser, go under maybe some models, clear out my search, and I'll just search for the word tree. And we grab any tree from the asset browser we like. I'll grab this black cherry tree. Let that load it. Let's grab one I might have downloaded. Just because the internet's not super speedy here. I think I downloaded that one there. Yeah. Okay, we'll keep it stylized. So nice little simple tree. Now, what's cool is if I grab this tree, and honestly, just for speed's sake, I'm going to get rid of the subdivision. If I throw this into a cloner, you saw that I generated like over 2,000 of those matrix objects. We wouldn't want to clone 2,000 trees, but by making it a matrix object first, I can grab my cloner and say, hey, I want you to clone onto an object, and that object will be this matrix object. And now that's going to be only, let me say, not to align clone. Okay, I do want to align clone. Let's say we're rotating those. Why aren't they those spinning? matrix. Clone instance offset matrix.
That was it.
Okay, well, all my trees don't want to rotate, so I'm going to spin my axis, holding down the 7. It's R, hold down 7 for rotate, and I'm going to force these to rotate the way I want them to. That's actually a tip that I was going to be talking about later on. If you want to move the parent object and not the children, you can hold down the 7 key and rotate everything. Anyway, my entire point here was it's now taking on all the attributes of that matrix object, but it's in this case, it's probably only cloning a couple hundred trees instead of the thousands I generated to create my random distribution. So that's sort of the basics of the setup, but let's turn off that cloner temporarily and let's make this a bit fancier. I'll hit T for scale up my plane a bit, and let's go to my top view. And I'm going to draw a spline. So I will grab my spline tool here, my spline pen. Let's just draw out maybe like a meandering river here. Make a little nice clean shave, drifting in, drifting out of my scene. Okay, cool. So because I did that from the top view, this should be drawn perfectly flat on the ground. Okay, so now here's the thought. Let's delete out that push apart. And now you see I've still got all these clones going, tons of them. And yeah, so yeah, now we got 2,000 clones going there. I might even make more of these. Let's do like, about 10,000 clones all over the place. So now here's where the technique gets really interesting to me. What we're going to do is instead of doing that push apart hide effect, why don't we first scale our objects up? So I'm going to grab a plane effector, and currently it's pushing it's moving them on Y. Instead, I'm going to say I want to scale them. And I'll say a uniform scale, and I'll just grab the scale, and for now, I'll say it goes up. Well, let's go a little overboard. I'll say it's going to scale it up by 5. So you see all my matrix objects getting huge.
Literally.
And now I'll go under my fields and grab that spline and drag it in. And now you see we get kind of this crazy setup, which looks cool by itself. But let's move into the layer tab. And instead of me traveling like along the spline, I'm going to say I want to see the radius of the spline. So now you can see that I've got this simple radius I can drag up, and some of these clones that are closest spline are getting big. Really straightforward setup. So bigger, make those larger. So now all I've done is scaled up these clones. But here's the interesting thing. If we make another push apart effector, and actually I'm going to be careful here, and I'm going to deselect everything, make a push apart, because I didn't just make like 11,000 of them. And I'm going to say not push apart, but instead hide. And I'll make the number very small, just to make sure it's not suddenly trying to do a bazillion calculations as it pushes them all apart. So I will apply this to my matrix object after the plane. Now, here's the cool thing, is the radius here is being multiplied by your object's scale. Whatever the scale was as it's coming into the push apart means that this radius is increasing. So I made these 5 times larger. So these are now saying hide them 5 times further apart from each other. So if I start increasing my radius further and further until we actually start seeing an effect here, and I do have a lot of clones, so I might actually drop the clone count down just to be reasonable. Say about 5,000. And grab that push apart, and let's say I want to increase this to 5. And there we go, look at that. Let's push this up to 10. And now look, now I've got a very high density over here of 10. But now if we're very close to the spline, it is whatever I multiplied, which is times 5. So these are trying to spread apart or delete, hide all of the clones if they're within 50, 5 times my current radius. So now you see I do get larger clones directly around it. So why don't I grab my cloner and I will create another effector. This is one I almost never use, but it's really handy for this. I'll grab a re-effector, and I'll just reorder these to the order we're actually using them. So first we scale, then we hide by pushing apart, and then we do a refactor. And I'm gonna say, okay, re-effector, yes, I want to keep my scale, but I'm gonna reset the rotation and the position back to whatever they used to be. And let me make sure that I actually feed this into my matrix object. And now you see those return back to their original scale. So now essentially all I did was interject this plane effector, use some sort of fall off, make it larger, use that to change my density, and then reshrunk them back down again. So now we can manipulate the density just by manipulating this plane effector and its field. So I could grab this and increase my radius. So I can say, hey, I want the river fall off to be larger. And I see this density is really far apart and falls off. I could shrink it really far down. Let's grab one of these modifiers here, and I will say I would like a invert. So where is it? It is right there. So I'm going to say invert. And now there's a really high density near the river. Maybe you want a bunch of plants growing near the river and they could be randomly distributed away from the river. So this opens up so many possibilities. I'll delete that invert away, and let's drop in instead this curve. And now I can remap the shape exactly as I want. So as I fall this off here, I can directly control exactly what the density should look like. So now you see it's more smoothly falling in, and then we get only that really large density nearby. Or we could do the opposite, where I really push this pretty far, and we're near that spline, but we could have almost an immediate fall off. So really large radius and it falls off. So think about layering this up multiple times and completely controlling your density. We can say really large trees like everywhere else except by the river, but then I want these kind of like smaller riverside plants going only near where my spline is. So I think this technique is incredibly helpful for doing like advanced distributions. And hopefully you see it's not very complicated. We just scale something, push it apart, and then use a refactor to reset it. And if I were to reclone my trees, hopefully back on there, then now you can see the trees are taking on those attributes and we get that perfect density placed again. And of course, you'd want to go and grab like your random effector, place that on top, get some randomness, grab my trees and spin them around randomly. Just grab that axis and give that a little spin. And obviously it's always a good idea to do a little bit of random scale on those, so bigger and smaller. But the main thing here is look at this distribution. And this technique, I did this on a plane, but this is not limited to a plane. This could be on any sort of like rolling hills and whatnot, because it's simply based on the radius of those clones being near each other. So anyway, I really, really like that technique. That's probably the largest section of this. Oh yeah, and so here's like that same setup. You see here, I do have it on a hill. And this one is just based on these spherical fall-offs. So like you have these spherical fall-offs and scoot them around, and anywhere I drag that, you can see it's going to be saying that the density should be lighter. And of course, parametrics, I can always go back, change any number I want. Alrighty, let's close this down and see what's next. Up next is the square area weighted. Here's a nice super quick one. And I did talk about this extensively in my What's New video when this came out, but for anybody who doesn't know, I want to make sure that you know about this. So here's just a essentially default text object here, and I'm going to make a parametric bevel. I love doing this. So we just go and make a bevel, which, yeah, there it is on the bottom. So I'll make a bevel, drop it as a child, everything's getting beveled. But of course, the instant we do this, the Phong is getting super duper messed up. So now the reason I do like using this bevel instead of just like modifying it here is this will actually bevel every single edge. You see that edge and that front edge. But of course, our Phong has gotten super duper messed up. Well, they added in a new type of Phong algorithm that you can use. And if you click on here, we're still using the default style of uniform. But if I switch this to square area weighted, it essentially just magically fixes it. So like what my rule currently is if my Phong isn't looking perfect, just try switching it to the square area weighted, and there's a good chance it'll just magically start working for you. So this, I didn't do any custom edge breaks. Essentially I didn't do anything, and we get this perfectly smooth Phong, and we don't get, well, let me switch it back. We don't get any of this crazy funky Phong problems where it makes everything look crazy rounded. So yeah, super easy one, but yeah, square area weighted. Moving on. Am I talking too fast, everybody? I know I can't. This is should hopefully be uploaded online like in a day or two. So you can always go and watch it in the slower speed. Okay, another relatively simple one, but I just didn't realize it was here. So I thought other people might not know either. So we got a little splines menu. So if I were to go to some top view here and just draw out another kind of squiggly spline here. So we've got the spline, and we're still in the pen tool. This is the important part. You're in the pen tool. You probably knew this. In the pen tool, when they updated it, you can go and grab the edge. You can modify like these in-between parts. Like you can modify the tangents by grabbing the line segment in between your 2 points. Now, of course, you can also grab the point itself and rotate it. But something I did not realize, something I did not realize is if we right-click, there's a little menu in here. So you can do things like delete the edge, and that now has gone away. Let me undo, bring that back. You can right-click and say, give me a hard edge on there, and so we get that straight one. Now, on top of that, I didn't realize this until I accidentally did it for this presentation. If you double-click on that line, it will actually turn it into the smooth version, and if you double-click, it'll turn it into the hard edge version. So, again, pretty cool. And then the last one, let me double-click, make that smooth. The last one I thought was pretty neat is if you right-click on there, you get split point. So exactly perfectly from the tangent of where I was drawing, it'll actually draw kind of a branching like fly out from that location. So if I was trying to draw some sort of two-dimensional plan, it can just say split from here and it perfectly continues fine from there. Now what it actually did, it's important to note, is this line is now continuing through, and then it's actually traveling down that new path I made. And this, let me hit spacebar so I can grab this, say UW. I can scoot this away. You see that's now a separate spline segment. But yeah, you can continue that spline, do that little double click technique. Just had no idea it was there. Moving on. What do we got? Oh, Spline Symmetry. So a lot of you are probably going to know that they built in like those amazing new Symmetry tools for modeling. And then we got a fully updated, brand new Symmetry object here. So we had the old one, but now we got this new Symmetry object. But if you didn't know, you can use this perfectly on splines as well. So I just want to show you a couple little techniques here. So if I were to drag my text object into my Symmetry, you can see that that's mirroring. But I'm going to say I would like to mirror not on X, but on Y. So I see it's mirroring top and bottom. And then if I hold down, I want to move it up. But of course, if I move it up my Symmetry point, it's going to move my text as well. So if you hold down the 7 key on your keyboard, I can scoot this up and you see I can actually pass it through the entire thing. We see it's kind of overlapping. We're getting a double spline. So inside the Symmetry, there is a option to remove outside. So if I turn on remove outside, you see it's actually going to chop it off right where your Symmetry is happening. And then there's this weld option. And if I say weld where it crosses the plane, it's now welding this top spline to the bottom spline. And this is a perfect mirror. So I can grab that 7, hold down the 7 key again and scoot this around. So you see I can mirror this anywhere I want to and get that mirroring effect. And now I can grab my Symmetry and do all the standard things like feed this directly into a sweep. Into that sweep, I will directly feed in end side, shrink that way down to, let's say, 5. And yeah, now we get that one continuous spline. That Symmetry is acting as a spline. And yes, Symmetry does work on that. And then one more tidbit I wanted to mention here, which I think is pretty cool and just fun to do, is you get a really nice kaleidoscoping effect. Let's delete out the Symmetry and just make ones in Scratch. So I'll make Symmetry, drop my text back inside. And I'm going to say I want to do this not as a plane, but radially. And let's change that to be facing towards the camera, towards Z. So I'll turn that on, and we're going to get this really cool radial. If I do that same thing I was doing a second ago, hold down 7 and scoot this around, you see that I'm getting this cool kaleidoscoping effect. But it looks better again if I say chop it off outside the plane, and I could weld them if I want, not really important here. Hold down 7, and now look at this cool kaleidoscope effect just by moving that around. But then even more fun, when you're in this radial effect, I can say I want to mirror what is getting radially, symmetrized, if that's a word. So I'm going to click on this mirror here, and now it's actually taking it, chopping it, mirroring it on both sides, and then doing this radial effect. So now look at this for like a telescoping type effect. As I scoot this around, look at all these crazy cool shapes I can make, where I can make something that looks kind of like a snowflake. If we zoom this way in, like look at this crazy like flower-esque pattern I can generate just by scooting that to a different position. And I try and imagine how I might make that in the past. It'd be like almost impossible. And here, just by taking different letters, I could probably just make so many different type of splines right out of the gate. So yeah, Symmetry, pretty powerful if you go and you combine that on top of a spline instead of just the standard mesh workflow where you're like mirroring a character on both sides, which of course is super important, but this one's really fun. So yeah, Symmetry. Moving on, next tip and or trick, keyframe layouts. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, keyframe layout. I was trying to remember what this one actually was. So I don't know if anybody else has this experience. For no particular reason, just it bugs the heck out of me. Is when I click on this one's already completed. But when you click on this little timeline button down here, it just makes the teeny little timeline for you. And it's like every single time I have to go, yes, I'm seeing my timeline, but it's not big enough. So anyway, this is incredibly simple, but I just go and grab this, make that really big. It's like when I'm looking at my timeline, I just want a tiny little viewport, and then I can immediately go and click on my menu. So we go to my window. Oh wait, very important, recollapse it back down again. Now I can go window, customize, and then say save as my startup layout. And now if I were to open up a new file, brand new file, close down Cinema, reopen Cinema, whatever you want to do. Now when I click to open that up, it's actually going to be bigger and I can get to it quicker. I know it's a trivial and tiny thing, but like, I don't know. That saves me dozens of clicks a day. So wanted to pass that along. Okay, let's close that down and reset that back to small and move on to the next one, which is going to be, that's right, we do it. The next one is 4 keyframe tips. Now I need to see if I can remember what all these tips are going to be. So let's close that one down. And we've got, okay, I remember the first one. Okay, so I've got this figure. I'm just using it as an example of a character, and simple as we get, really. If we make the figure editable, there's actually an entire hierarchy of objects. So I can grab this little kind of like dummy character, and I can go and position them. Actually, before I do that, let me tell you what the trick is. Here's a little bonus trick. If you ever select an object and you want the entire hierarchy selected, you can middle click your mouse button as a button, and it'll actually select every object as a child. I actually do that all the time. But what I want to do is keyframe him in his T-pose. Very often when you're working on a character and you're going to be doing some animation, later on you got to change something about the rig and their character's in some crazy positions. And you're like, oh, I wish I could get back to his original position. Well, something that's cool, and here's a technique that I like to do, is just keyframe the entire character in his T-pose at the beginning. But I don't want it actually keyframed in my timeline. I don't want to see that when I go to render it out. So a feature that got added in recently, it's very tiny, but you can actually now record your keyframes outside of the range of your timeline. Before, you could go to a negative time, but you weren't allowed to hit record on your keyframes. But now I've gotten to the time of -1, and now I can keyframe him on his position and his rotation. I guess it's actually just rotation. So I'll keyframe his rotation, and now go 1 frame forward, and now I can repose him into whatever pose I like. Let's grab that, tilt the head a little bit, grab this one, spin it on down. And now I've got that new pose. I'll select all my objects. Let's keyframe it again. And now I can go through and design an entire character animation. And then later when the client's like, oh, wait, no, I want to change some model aspect, like on the eyebrows, I can be like, oh, I can go back to my original model and I can just go to time of 0. Now I can go back 1 frame. I go back to my T-pose. It's not interfering in my timeline, but I'm able to record outside of it. And this also counts for like recording outside your timeline, and if you go forward as well. Pretty often, if you want to get like a looping animations, you actually want to, let's say you've got a 3-second looping animation, you actually want the loop to be happening on like frame like 91, not 90, but you want your timeline to still be at 90. So you can go 1 forward and still get your keyframes recording. So anyway, just a little tip there in case anybody didn't realize I got snuck in. Okay, so next up, I've got this little robot character I made a while ago. I kind of challenged myself to make an animation in 1 day. So I modeled, rigged it, and textured and animated this guy in 1 day just for fun. So there goes, causes back down. So yeah, like my little robot guy. So here's a very simple thing. Let's say you want to isolate and work on a particular type of time of your animation. So I'm scrubbing through and I just want to see like the ta-da moment, and I want to work on a section. So I'm going to scrub right here. If you hold down Shift and I as a shortcut, it's actually going to trim your timeline. That's now your incoming time. And then if I scrub to the end of his ta-da, now I can hold down Shift O, and that's now the output of my timeline. So if you go to the incoming time and the outcoming time, by holding on Shift I, Shift O, and both keys are right next to each other on the keyboard, which is pretty handy. And now if I hit my timeline, I'm just going to be looping that little section. Now, obviously, you could manually drag it, but now I could just shortcut it, which is very handy. And if you didn't know, I can always just double click on my timeline right in the center, and it's going to re-expand it to be your entire timeline again. Next up, this one, if you didn't know, is pretty powerful. I'm going to keyframe a little camera movement for us here. So let's create a camera. I'll link myself to it, and let's go pretty extreme here, zoom up on my character, and say, okay, I want to record my position and my rotation. So I'll click to record my timeline at the time of 0. Let's fast forward to the end time. I'll rotate it around and say, I just want to spin around to the opposite side. Okay, all good. So now I can hit play, and you see the camera is moving along. It's going to not be framing character very well in the middle, but you can see that I've got this one continuous animation drifting from one side to the other. So let's say that I want to like remap that somehow. I want it to like really accelerate in and that means out. So that would be kind of a pain to do. Let's move into my timeline, which is nice and big, thanks for the change we made. And let's go to our F curves, and I'll click on just my camera, expand that, and yeah, I can hit Control A to select all of my current camera, hit S to frame up on it. S is frame selection. So you can see that is my position and rotation of the camera I just recorded. Now, here's a cool trick. If I were to select something just like X, so here's like the most extreme curve, so I can see it very clearly. So I'm going to say, I want this to really accelerate in really fast, and then I want it to really, really ease out from where it is. Then if I go back to my viewport and hit play, it's going to look all wrong because now my X is moving and none of the other ones are moving. So it's not framing at all properly in the center. It's not keeping the robot in the center. So let's go back to the timeline, and here's the actual cool new thing. If I were to select the start and end keyframe there, I can go to Edit, and you see there's something called Copy Ease. So I'm going to copy my ease there, and now let's select all of these, and I will just zoom out a bit so I can make sure I select all of them. So with all of those selected, I will go Edit, and I will say Paste Ease. And now you see all those curves adapt, and they've adapted relative to their particular scale. So now if I go back and look at my camera, it is now always staying focused in the center, just like it originally was, but now I'm losing in my animation. So yeah, copy and paste the ease of any of your F curves. So yeah, incredibly handy there. And then I'll delete out of that camera and just make a brand new one and go to the third little keyframe tip and trick. And a lot of you might know about this one. Again, I'm trying to find things that I think that are sleeper functions, that people might not know about. So in this case, I'm going to do a similar kind of keyframe where I will say, hey, I want to record that there. And then we will fast forward to the end. And I will say I want to keyframe here. And then I'll go to this point where he's kind of at full scale, and I'll just add in a third keyframe. So I'll say I want to frame up somewhere right around there. And now we hit play. And now we actually get a transition where he should be keeping the character somewhat in frame. And he's there focused, and it's cool. Now he's going to jump to his little pose. But now the camera's starting to drift away from where he was. And yes, he goes back in for the final keyframe. But what I want to talk just a little bit about is the tween tool. So in your timeline down here, we've got this button, and it's called the tween tool. And if you haven't played with it, it's incredibly simple, but it's actually really powerful as a animation workflow tool. So what I'm going to do is scroll to the time that he's like, it's like right here is the worst point where it's like, I really want him still in frame. So if I open up my tween tool, I've currently got my camera selected. So it's modifying the keyframes of that. And this is now saying like, okay, we are some percentage of the way between that keyframe in the center of my timeline and the end. And I can say, I want to create a brand new keyframe where I am, but I want it to be influenced by the previous keyframe or the next keyframe. So I can say, okay, I want it to have moved a little bit, but if I scroll this back, I say at this time, I want it to be like 37% of what the previous keyframe was. And now you can see I made a brand new keyframe right there. And now if I were to scrub through, I am framing up on the robot a little bit better. And then maybe even here, I want to make another keyframe because it's moving a little too quick. So I can say, okay, this one I want to be still more influenced by the previous one. And we're just retweening between existing keyframes to make a more finalized animation without me having to go and record more keyframes. I can just say, hey, base it off the previous ones. And now I'm keeping my little guy in frame, way better, chops him down, exactly what I wanted. It does actually a lot more than that, but if you haven't played with the tween tool, you should definitely play around with it. So yeah, that's 3 little tips about keyframes. Let's see what's next. The oddest icon. Okay, so sticking with the timeline. This actually isn't a tip, it's not a trick. I just bumped into it. I was like, this is so weird, I gotta show people. So if we move into, I'll just open this file. Let's go back into our timeline. And you know that you can make markers. So I can jump to any time and click this marker button and we get this little marker. And what my tip was going to be is if you didn't know, if you want to delete your marker easily, you can just grab the marker and you can drag it away. But here's the actual thing that I thought was interesting is look at the icon here. I think that Maxon didn't realize that this icon was still in cinema because this looks like it's from like a 30-year-old Mac. Like, look at this cute little trash can. I'm going to be so sad if they get rid of it because I found the secret icon that hasn't probably been updated in more than 20 years. So yeah, you get this little trash can guy. But yeah, the actual tip is you can grab your markers and just drag them out and they get deleting. But yeah, love that icon. Don't get rid of it, please. Okay, jumping on, Rocket Lasso capsules. So I'm not really going to be able to do much of a demo here because I could literally spend like 4 hours straight just talking about them, but everybody needs to know this. So Rocket Lasso for the last 2 years has been spending a lot of time and effort essentially building a bunch of little mini plugins inside of Cinema 4D using the note system inside of it. And a lot of those tools that we made were locked away behind the Maxon One. So a couple of them are available if you just had a regular Cinema 4D subscription, but most were under Maxon One. Well, almost all of them have now been moved into regular Cinema 4D subscription, and they've even been put right into the menu. So if you click on your drop-down menu for your deformers, you're now going to see a bunch of Rocket Lasso tools that I think are really powerful. They're really fun. If you have not played with them, check them out. But you now see that we get the branched spline modifier, the break spline modifier, the catenary modifier, the electric spline modifier. That's my second favorite. Pulse spline, dash spline, the partition modifier. I'm going to be talking a lot more about some of these in my second presentation on Wednesday, so make sure you come by there. But just to do a really quick demo, I just want to show you a little bit of power. And like I said, if you got a C4D subscription, you've now got these. So let me show you the branch spline modifier because I think it's my favorite. So in this menu, there's a couple other objects that are actually not even in the menu that you get access to as well, like the Rocket Lasso grid spline generator, and I think the photograph is available now. But anyway, I'm going to grab this new line generator that's actually also built from nodes, not by Rocket Lasso, but this is just going to create a nice straight line, a simple straight line, finally. And I'm going to say, hey, aim this up on Y, so we get a line aiming up on Y. So now I'm going to go to the new Rocket Lasso branch spline modifier. So essentially, this is a Rocket Lasso plugin already built into Cinema for you. So I'm going to grab the branch spline modifier, drop it onto the line, and you're going to see we kind of get this feather looking thing. but I want to very quickly make a tree out of this. So we'll just change a couple settings here. I want maybe not quite as many branches. I'm going to offset my placement to be up higher. Let's say that the scale is relative to the trunk of the tree. And then I'll go down to my initial direction, and we could say that these should be flaring out. They can be straight. You can do so many cool things with this. But I'm going to add in some angle variation. I'm going to add a lot of roll variation. Actually, go easy on that angle variation. Go out. But now here's where it gets interesting, is I just said to generate 5 branches, but at every branch point, there's actually 2 branches, so we're making 10 new branches, and it's about 59% of the size of the original trunk. So here's where it gets fun, is I'll just take that branch spline modifier, hold down Control, or Command if you're on a Mac, duplicate it, and now my branches are generating branches. Let me put that on there again. So now my branches have branches have branches. And now I can grab all of those branch spline modifiers and make any changes I like. We can make more branches. I'm actually going to pull back on them a little bit. Let's go into my direction and say, let's add in a bunch of twisting on there. So I'm going to twist these branches around, make them look more organic. We've got gravity on here. So I can grab these and say, hey, well, I want a bunch of gravity and have it droop downward. And even if this wasn't built to be coherent, but a lot of these settings are pretty coherent. Look how smooth that is. You can actually animate an entire tree like growing or wilting just by changing a couple of these sliders. I can actually grab my gravity and go negative on it and have all the branches want to aim upward. So I could generate an entire forest from here. Instead of putting these branch spline modifiers on this one line, I could clone that line all over a landscape on a mountain, and then branch spline modify on top of that. So you can layer and layer and layer, generate so many different things, like very, very powerful. So that's just like one little taste of like 7 parameters of one of the Rocket Lasso tools that everybody now gets access to. So very excited about that. Couple things to note. If you go into your assets browser, go under auto or all and search for the word Rocket Lasso. Let me actually spell my own company's name right. Lasso. Then you're going to see that we got all these different icons, and these are all different example scene files that you get, showing all these different disciplines. Like here, I'm growing an entire rose bush using that branch spline modifier. But we got a whole bunch of other ones as well. If I scroll down, you can see here's all of the tools, and I think a handful of them are going to be Maxon 1. Like the IV generator is still Maxon 1, but all these other ones, the constellation modifier, oh, this one's so good. It like interconnects your particles on top of each other, and you can make some really cool MoGraph effects. But anyway, the last thing to mention there is head on over to Symmetry, because I've recorded a tutorial on every single one of the tools that we've made. So go check them out. We still got a couple more tools you haven't even seen yet that are still going to be coming out. So very, very excited to have the Rocket Lasso tools out there and available to everybody with a C4D subscription. All right, moving on. I have no idea how long I've been talking, so at some point they're going to come out and yell at me. Camera rig. I might actually skip over this one. I don't think the information you get is super duper useful and it takes a little while to do. The basic, actually, yeah, I've got the completed one. So let's just jump to the completed one if it works, and I'll talk about like the final version of it. Let's see if it opens up properly. Yeah, I need to reinitialize. The basic idea is that I could have a camera, keyframe this camera to be traveling through this like big box this wide. But you kind of get this very mechanical movement. You see that kind of those nauseating twists and turns. But then I make a second camera and I tell it to follow the first camera with a spring. And I make it a lot of drag and a lot of just a little bit of stiffness, and it was going to smooth it out. So if I move to the second camera, and now it's going to be taking the edge off of all those turns, all the movements. And then I layer up a third camera, and this third camera is now referencing the softened camera, and this one has a bunch of springiness. So there's like very little drag, but there's some stiffness. So now as it does a sharp movement, my camera will overlap. And so keeping everything clean and parametric, I can go through, I can look at my first camera, look at my second, but now you can see that the camera movement is a lot smoother and organic as we travel through here, rather than the very harsh one if I just click on the unmodified straight align the spline version of it. So yeah, think about layering up your cameras. And what's handy is like if you need it to be very precise, you can just jump to that earlier camera. So it's very non-destructive. So moving on, what do we got? The matrix object. Actually, this one's really quick. We're already kind of playing around with it, but I just want more people to know about this. Let's make a helix spline here. I'll tell it to face upward, and I'm going to make a matrix object. Now, something that often happened to me is I'd be using the matrix object, and I do use matrix object all the time because it's so great to like prototype out what you want your cloner to do, and then just clone your final cloner object. And actually, we use the matrix in a lot of Rocket Lasso tools as well. But anyway, I'm going to clone this onto the spline. So I'll say object. I'll say clone onto the helix. And we can make, as many of these as I want. But at certain points, like, they'll start getting in the way in the viewport. In the past, you'd have to go to your transform and scale them down, but of course now you're actually scaling down your clones. You know how to do that. Well, they snuck in a handy little tool, which is the draw size of your matrix. So you can now modify how large those look in your viewport, but you're not actually affecting the size of the clone at all. So you can actually make these really tiny, and now they're not getting in the way. I get the information I want. They didn't stop me from doing what I wanted. Now, let's push this a little bit further, just in case anybody didn't know this. If you have a matrix object, you can feed it into a tracer object. If you have it selected, it'll automatically be fed into the tracer. And I don't actually want to trace these moving around. What I want to do is interconnect them. So if you didn't know, you can change your tracing mode to connect all objects. And now you see that we've got a new spline drawn on top of that. So here's actually kind of a simple, fun way of like resampling a spline. I can say, okay, I want to clone however many of this matrix object along. And now you can see I can make a low res version of my original helix. So in theory, I could like layer several of these on top of each other and see like one spline on top of the other. So yeah, resampling can be kind of fun using a matrix object with a tracer. And then also, if you didn't know, you could layer up multiple objects inside of it. So let's say, I'll just keep it simple, copy and paste that matrix a second time, scoot this one off to a new position. I'll grab the tracer and feed in the second matrix, and it will actually interconnect between those objects as well. So I could kind of continue one spline into another by layering those up. So yeah, move these around, have them be interconnected. And of course, we got those matrices, so I could kind of sample one part of the matrix a lot higher and the other lower. So I've actually got two different resolutions directly on my spline. So yeah, just a couple little tidbits there on the matrix object. I hope more people are using that. All right, viewport HDR, HDRI. This one's incredibly simple. Here is, it'll take a second to load up.
Yeah, they
Hopefully. Oh, wait. Oh, no. The first one I have to load manually. Okay, so we're going to pop open one of my example files here. I'm going to pop open this partition modifier. Now, on Wednesday, we'll be talking a little bit about the partition modifier and some more tips and tricks. But here is one of the example files for our partition modifier. I guess just for a split second, what does partition modifier do? Well, if you have any geometry, let's say this cube, if I go and grab my Rocket Lasso partition modifier and I drop it inside, it's going to do these really cool subdivisions on top of your geometry. So you can start cranking this up a whole bunch, make all these like crazy layers, get these like kind of greebly technological looking effects on there. And there's all sorts of like animation tools on top of that. So you can hit play, move those. So anyway, that's some basics of the partition modifier. Now, using the partition modifier, I layered it up a bunch of times, and starting with a plane, I generated the city from it. So entirely parametric, I can go back to this partition modifier with the first break and say, hey, I want there to be fewer. So I'll say only 300 first cuts, and I see I get a completely different city. And we got some with angles, some with different heights. So a lot of fun you can do just with the partition modifier. But this tip is actually supposed to be about loading your HDRs. And again, very, very simple. But if you move into your asset browser and we go to all or auto, you'll see you got your HDR folder right here on the left. I am actually the one who bugged them to be like, no, HDRIs are important. Put it like at the top side of the menu. So yeah, that is here, and you got a bunch of different HDRs. A lot of these are going to be Maxon 1 exclusive, but a bunch of them aren't. So I can go in here and I can grab like this one, and if you didn't know, if you're using Redshift, you can just grab any HDR and drag it straight to your viewport, and it's going to have to load in. And I think I've got that pre-downloaded. Yeah, good. Oh wait, let me delete the scene because it was actually putting it into the existing one. Sorry about that. Let me load it in again. So I can load it in, and you see my HDR was automatically created. It made a dome light, and it automatically put it inside. If I'm like, okay, cool, I like the lighting there, that's working, I can spin this around. But I can grab a different HDR, drag that in, and it'll actually find your dome light wherever it is in the scene and replace it with the next HDR. So it's very quick to like rapidly iterate and be like, no, not that one, no, not that one, no, okay, cool, that one looks good. So, just a huge time saver to me. Moving on, another little viewport thing. This is still going to, wait, let me let that load in. That's the demo one there. So yeah, the viewport, camera composition. Yeah. So some people might know about this already. If you don't know, it's pretty cool. If I make a new camera and we link to it, they added in a whole bunch of these under display. They added a bunch of these different compositions. So if I were to say I would like to activate a grid, my active camera is going to get this overlay where I can get this kind of 3/4 subdivision. And now, very easily, I can kind of frame up my shot and make sure I got the points of interest intersecting on that grid. Going inside, you got a bunch of different settings. You could subdivide the grid further. But we've got other types. We've got this diagonal one, the keyframe those, interestingly. We do diagonal. We could do a double diagonal and kind of get this big crosshair. We got triangles. I honestly, maybe some like more, somebody more artistic would know. I don't know compositionally what triangles means, but hey, there's some triangles. But then my favorite one is that we can do the golden spiral. So I can activate that golden spiral. And here I can like maybe move my camera around and try and get a nice composition going where I'm focusing maybe in this tall building, but now I can frame it up so that I know that this arc is kind of following the street. And I'm kind of getting that nice arc, and then we get these points of interest right where I want them. So yeah, anyway, just a cool camera composition there just to help you lay your camera out. And that kind of snuck in. I'm not sure how many people know it's there. And then this last one is kind of funny. I did this accidentally while working on the tutorial. I saw there was a smudge on my keyboard while I was working on this scene, and I accidentally pushed in the key, and on your numpad, you got a plus and a minus key. And if you hit minus, you zoom out. If you hit plus, you zoom in. So if you've ever have you ever done that thing where you accidentally like zoom inside an object and you're so close that you can't like move your camera out? I just hit the minus key a couple times, and you'll zoom out from where you currently are. It's actually dollying back. Very simple, basic, but I'm going to be using that all the time, I think. All right. Override grid matrix. Okay, I really like this one because I had no idea it was there. I just spent like a year working on my voxel mesher tool, and I had no idea that this setting existed. So, simple text here of NAB. I'm going to throw this into a volume builder, and I'll throw that volume builder into a volume mesher. Okay, cool. NB on the keyboard so we can see our mesh. You see, okay, we got our layout of where all of the voxels are. And essentially, voxels are just detecting is like, okay, here's a giant green space. Is the model intersecting one of those voxels? Like, just think of them a bunch of cubes. Is it intersecting that, or is it not? So if I were to grab my text object and kind of scoot it around, you see we're kind of passing through a cloud of voxels. And you see we kind of get different layouts based on it. But here's the thing I had no idea was there, and that is inside the volume builder, there's something called the override grid matrix. So if I make a null object and I feed that null in, we are now able to move around that cloud of voxels. So if I grab it and do the simplest thing, I can now, without moving my text, I can move where the mesh is calculating. So you see here, at some places, they're getting interconnected. At some places, the A is missing the hole. But I can actually move it to the perfect spot, not changing any settings, and now I've got the hole, and these are not interconnected. So that's pretty cool. Now, maybe a little more fun is you get R for rotate, and I can start spinning this around, and we can rotate the axis to some new orientation, and you get these kind of crazier layouts just to make a different type of geometry on top of whatever you are creating into a volume. But the one to me that's actually most interesting, so let's get rid of the rotation. I'm going to right click, reset, 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 reset. Well, that's what's interesting to me is that you can use scale as well. So I'm going to grab the Y scale and start scaling it down. And you can see I'm making the mesh denser, but only on one axis. We're actually squishing down the cloud of voxels, and we're sampling it differently. I had no idea this setting was here. Now, that's kind of fun here in the context of this mesher, but it is so much more fun in the context of my new tool. So just spend this quick second on there. If we do that exact same workflow, I'm going to feed this into a volume builder. And then inside the volume builder, I will make that null. And I would say, okay, reference that null. Now I'm going to feed that volume builder into my new plugin, 15% off this week. Use code block by block. Let's drop that into my voxel mesher here, and instantly see we're actually getting those voxels returned as cubes. So with that in mind, I can grab that null and I could scoot my null around. But here's what makes it cool. Here's what makes it cool is I can grab that and start scaling it down, and you can see I'm actually getting squished down cubes. So in this case, I could say, okay, I want to scale that down, and now I will click. We kind of got this really handy workflow button where I can click inside of voxel mesher and say, hey, convert this entire thing to a cube cloner. And now I'm actually just returning, let me undo this. I'm actually returning a point cloud, and my cloner is cloning onto that point cloud. You can see I've got just a bunch of cubes. I'm going to delete out that cube, and I already kind of easy baked this little single building brick. So I got like this little Lego here. And if I drop that inside my volume builder, and now I can grab my null and scale down my null until I'm at that perfect height. And now I've got all of those perfectly interlocking on top of each other as a perfect volume, whole voxel, like cloud at a non-uniform scale. So we can grab that. I could grab a random effector, and now we can export all those out, put some sort of like field fall off, make it linear, and I could like pass this through, do all these MoGraph effects on top of it, just seeing those bricks directly. So yeah, voxel mesher is super fun, but more to the point is the idea of being able to do that override group matrix, like so much fun. I'm gonna see if there's like a quick one here, but I was just given the, oh yeah, this is a super duper quick one. So I'll do this one and then we'll have to wrap up. So let me go and attractor types. This is something I've kind of ranted about in the past, where we've had all of these really great forces for a long time. And one of the forces is this attractor force. But let's go ahead and hit play. I've got a simple particle setup with the new particles, and you can see them right there. They're just hanging out. They're not moving. I made them rainbow so we can actually see them. So if I were to make a simulate forces attractor and we hit play, you get this kind of crazy effect where it's kind of behaving kind of close to a real world, where the further away it is, the less gravity is pulling it. As it gets closer and closer to the 0 point, it's accelerating. But that means it's kind of getting infinitely fast as it gets really, really close, and they go flinging away into space. And essentially, that's not the behavior I want. Often I want a attractor, and I want them to just move in at constant speed. So for years, I was making like a field mouse and feeding in a spherical field fall off, and then making it like a uniform fall off. But at some point, I don't even know when they did it. I never even mentioned it in a What's New video or anything, is they snuck in some different fall off types. So you see how these are kind of like flinging all over the place, but I can click on the fall off types and I can do a constant. And now these are now doing what I was talking about. They're now being pulled in at a constant rate, and they're not getting accelerated out to infinity. They actually are just moving in exactly at a constant rate. And if they're farther away, it gets flung to the opposite side until this attractor can overcome the force and pull them back in again. So the entire tip is just, hey, there's some secret additional fall off types I had no idea were there. And oftentimes you want this constant force, so you don't get that crazy acceleration. So I do believe that, let's see, the next one was going to be, the next one's a good one, which is everyday node capsules, but I have got to wrap it up. So I'm actually going to scroll this down to my goodbye slides here. You can see that where are the stylized photos, iOS.com. You go there. Yeah, I think we're just going to go and say thank you very much, everybody, for attending my presentation. I'm going to be having another one where we're just continuing this presentation on Wednesday. So I'll just keep on talking about more and more type of stuff. I love doing these tips and tricks because I feel like at no matter what skill level you're at, I'm going to have like a little something in there that you didn't already know how to do. So I was supposed to do 2 presentations. I only built one because I know I always go over on it. And when I did a practice run, it was 2.5 times too long. So anyway, just a reminder, 15% off voxel measure. Use code block by block. This is for the week community only. You can just go to rocketlasso.com. You'll be able to find that. And of course, you can follow us at Rocket Lasso on all the different platforms. You're just at Rocket Lasso. And if you end up making anything cool out of any of our plugins, like please send it my way. I'd love to see it. And maybe we can even feature it too. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. And I'll see you at my next presentation. Bye-bye. That was good. You soon. I have no idea what time.
All right, everyone, stay tuned. We're going to have our next presenter up here as soon as we can.
I could have thought, I was like, I could have thought it, where is it?